The single most important commitment that Vice President Atiku can make to this country in all his years of labor and strive to build a democratic process in this country is to decide not to run. You've got to do something that is so dramatically outside the box that Nigerians can sit up and say, these are not just another recycled politicians trying to replace Tinubu. And of all those things, it has to be something that Atiku would do. And one of them is not to keep insisting that he has to run.
Atiku Abubakar has been contesting the presidency since 1992. Indeed, there is really no election since 1992 that he has not participated in. He ran against Abiola. In 1999, he ran first as governor, then as vice president. In 2003, he picked a form. And that was the crisis, that was what led to the crisis between him and Obasanjo. 2007, he ran, I think he ran on AD or so. 11, he ran, he came back to PDP, right? He ran, was it 11? He ran in 11 against Jonathan. 15, he ran. 19, he ran. 23, he wants to run. Now only you did.
Somebody needs to tell Atiku he would be a hero if he stood. It's the same problem Atiku has that Bola Tinubu has. The same problem. It's my turn. A sense of entitlement. It has to be me. It doesn't have to be you. Also, I can guarantee you, Sheriff, that if it is Atiku that is put in the ring against President Bola Tinubu in 2027, then I can already write the results myself. We don't need a Mokweton to put the results together.
If I let me put it straight, the day El-Rufai decides and is able to galvanize the opinion molders in the north to zero down on a P2B, for instance, as the candidate, that will be the end of the Tinubu administration. By 2023, something phenomenal also happened in the political space, when Peter Obi, similarly, riding on the platform of Labour Party, a hitherto obscure, unknown political party, and he rose to national prominence. Peter Obi garnered over 6 million votes on record and was able to win 12 states, 11 plus the FCT, 12 states, alongside the candidates of the ruling party, Ahmed Bola Tinubu of the APC, and Atiku Abubakar of the main opposition party. They all won 12 states apiece. And Obi won Lagos State, where the president comes from. He won the FCT, where the president resides, President Muhammadu Buhari. He won the state of the national chairman of the APC in Nasarawa. He won the state of the running mate of the PDP candidate, Mr. Okowa of the Delta State. He caused such levels of disruption that I'm sure he's encouraged along that path, because I think he still remains largely popular. People still feel that part of the reasons they voted for him are still very valid, given what we've seen in the last 2 years. El-Rufai has a grouse against the president, a legitimate grouse, because he worked for the president. Hate him or love him, he has something, he has a basis to be angry. And he has been working assiduously to undermine the president, particularly in the Muslim north, where he's like the Khalifa to Buhari. He's like the brain box of the Muslim north. But let me give him a tip. If he really wants to see the back of the president, let me tell you for what he will do. And I think they may be on the path to really achieving that. Let El-Rufai convince the Muslim north. If he's able to do that, I know he can, he has the capacity, to look towards the south for a candidate to support. Specifically the southeast. If I let me put it straight, the day El-Rufai decides and is able to galvanize the opinion molders in the north to zero down on a P2B, for instance, as the candidate, that will be the end of the Tinubu administration. The PDP is right now on the throes of death because it committed a mortal sin in 2023. And that sin was not zoning its presidential candidacy to the south. I had warned that the wind of presidency in 2023 was blowing south. And if the PDP feeds a northern candidate, it means it to be sailing against the wind. And if you do that, you are likely to risk your boat capsizing and sinking into oblivion. And that seems to be what's happening in PDP. The gale of defecation we are seeing is just a symptom of a deeper ailment. You see, when the PDP violated the zoning arrangement, it created a problem for the PDP because the PDP's strongest support base, the most consistent support base for the PDP has been the southern half of Nigeria. The southeast, the south-south, and of course, the areas in the north you call the middle belt. They've been the most consistent support base of the PDP. And so when this group came out to say, look, we want the presidency in 2023, and the APC too bowed to that pressure. You could see the concerted effort within the APC to shift power to the south. It reflected in the primary election, where the winner, the first runner-ups, and the second runner-up all came from the southern half of the country. So it showed you the effort that was also put in that party. But the PDP said it wanted to win an election. It wanted to take advantage of the electoral fortune of the North, which happens to be the largest voting demography in Nigeria. And we had wanted to say, look, PDP's priority for 2023 shouldn't be winning an election, but simply consolidating into the post-Buhari era. Because Buhari, as the sitting president, will work for his party to win one way or the other.
So
when PDP violated that zoning formula,
yes,
it betrayed his most consistent support base, which is the South.
Safabi
and with the emergence of a Southern president in the person of Ahmed, what you see happening now was what happened in 2003, when the southern part of the country is now coalescing around one of their own. And you know why this is important for us to understand? The 8-year rule of President Buhari was the most divisive in the history of Nigeria, the most sectional. Buhari instituted Arewa privilege in Nigeria that needed to be checked by power shift to the south. This was where the PDP didn't quite get it right. It was like a matter of do or die affair.
And I will give you my reasons. I'm not the most popular person for Atiku or his camp for saying this, but look at it. President Buhari ran for 8 years. He didn't run well. If he had, he would have mitigated the damage of all this business of, oh, we must have 8 years, we must have 8 years. So President Atiku's, President Buhari's record is not exactly the best preparation to have another northerner and make a case only for the fact that the person comes from the north for him to be elected. Atiku may have a lot of voters in the north, but Buhari has also alienated a huge number of Nigerians from this idea that being from one part of the country bestows upon you a capacity or an instinct for good leadership. So that's going to be a problem. The second one is people would ask, well, what can somebody like President Atiku and the people around him offer different from what APC and President Tinubu are offering? There's very little, especially when you don't know. They need to come out and say exactly what they are going to do and say it in a manner that Nigerians consider and say, but we have an option to all this poverty. We have an option to all this insecurity. We have an option to all these quarrels about coming from one part of the country. There are people who are saying, give us power and we can fix this country. So, but they haven't said so. And you know, I think that they're shortchanging themselves because ADC is substantially outside this terrible danger where the party and a few other sensitive state agencies throw ropes around you and tie you up with litigation and internal frictions until the elections are virtually over. So ADC is in a strong ground. But what ADC is not doing is not playing its card right. What would you do with power? The third reason why I think President Atiku's sacrifice for the nation is the best thing they can do is that it will give him immense powers to decide what happens in ADC and send signals to the people who would be jockeying for positions that he actually calls the shots. If he makes that sacrifice, it gives him huge power. Now, he doesn't become president, but he can decide who becomes president.
All right.
Flies the flag even before the convention, but you need to go through the formalities of a convention. You have, and you should mention Rufai as well, even though he says his hat is not in the ring. But so you have Obi, you have Kwankwaso, if he does come in, because Kwankwaso I'm not sure how much Kwankwaso has committed yet to the ADC, but let's assume he's there. Amaechi is there, Rufai is there, The former governor of Osun State is there. There are quite a number of Nigerians who have fairly credible records of having held power and quite possibly could offer leadership. Then President Atiku could say, our best hope, for instance, is to say, why don't we produce an Igbo president? Obi is with us. If we combine his huge popularity with the Southeast and Igbo people, and the huge number of votes that he got in the North, largely because of, I think, the religious element was prominent in the manner people responded in 2023. And then we go out to the country and say, let's try an Igbo president, elected Igbo president, because he's good, not just because he's Igbo president, because he has credible record as governor, and because if we do this, it will certainly be the catalyst for the defeat of APC. That's the kind of things that will go for an Igbo presidency. If it's not going to be Obi, then you have to look for somebody from the Southwest good enough to provide a competition to President Tinubu in the Southwest and in other parts of the country, and say it doesn't have to be a northerner who will take over from Tinubu, but we have somebody from the Southwest, someone who will do incredibly better than this presidency, which is allowing the country to drift and to sink deeper into insecurity and poverty and division. And so that you then have to look for a good person. Amaechi would also have his own power base. He can be prepared to be sold to the rest of the country. His drawback would be that he was so closely aligned with Buhari. A lot of people will smell Buhari every time he passes by. So that's going to be his limitation. The point he was making is that if you go through the conventional process of bringing out a candidate for a party, and that's a convention, not an anointing, not a handover, surrender to the ticket, Peter Obi is likely to lose. He used the word 100 times. I more or less agree with him. Vice President Atiku is head and shoulders better than all the other candidates in terms of emerging through a convention. Either he does this either through experience or he has wider spread, better structures and more loyal people. And he understands the mechanics of internal democratic politics, I think better than the others. I think Governor Peter Obi's people and himself are not helping his case. What he really needs to do, I think, is to go out and soil his boots. I think he's the most traveled politician I've seen in the recent time, and that's good for him. He tries to stay in touch with grassroots, which is good for him. But what he needs to do now is to really sit down with his people and come to terms with the fact that he is now running against hardline politicians who also have their eyes on the same thing that he has his eyes on. What Vice President Atiku did in terms of saying to his people, calm down, we don't want to start trading insults with each other, was the right thing. Peter Obi should do twice as much. I did a program 2-3 days ago where I mentioned the fact that Peter Obi would lose 100 conventions. You would be amazed at the number of people who commented and insulted me and said, oh, look at these people. How do they think Peter Obi will line up behind Atiku? I'm afraid in the democratic process, that's how it's done. You can have a consensus candidate. But you need to have the consensus of people like Atiku, maybe even Amaechi, and maybe there are 1 or 2 dark horses who are working behind the scene. The point is that ADC's ticket is up for grabs, but it will be a very, very difficult task for anybody to get it other than President Atiku. So you have to choose. You can play your card and stay still within the party. But things like, if I don't get a ticket, I don't stay, or your supporters say, no, give him the ticket, convention or no convention, it has to be Obi. I think those things don't have a place in the democratic process.